Hello, I'm Joanne, and this is Jo Mama's Garden. Today it's mid-February, and it is time to do some direct sowing into the garden. I like to direct sow a few different things in the garden because they seem to do a lot better. And those things are cucumber and squash. So we are going to plant some of these. Some of the ones in the baggies, of course, are the seeds that I have saved, and the others are ones I have bought. I purchased the honey boat and morrow squash from Baker Creek. I am also planting some cucumbers that I purchased from Seeds Now. They are the homemade pickles, the White Wonder, Boston pickling, and that's another homemade pickles. I really like that variety. And last but not least, I am going to be planting some Armenian cucumber and zucchini squash, the Gouda squash, and scallop squash. These were seeds that I saved from some of the plants from last year. I like to direct sow these seeds because they seem to start off pretty much the same. However, their growth patterns are much better than if I were to start them in a seed plug or a cup and transplant them later. It is mid-February here in Phoenix, and our last frost date was mid-January. So we have really a little bit late start on getting these into the ground, but we have had some very cool weather in the evenings. Our days are getting in the 70s, and we've had a couple in the 80s already. Right now it's in the high 60s, but it's only going to get warmer. One very important thing when you are starting any seed is you're going to only plant it the depth of twice of its width. So you saw the cucumber seeds. They are long and short in the center. So it's that short center that we are going to be planting to the depth of twice. And let me show you the area we have prepared. So I am going to be planting these cucumbers along this area that I have the fencing. I'm going to plant them about 6 inches apart, and they are going to then grow, and I can put them against this fencing right here. So these are the cucumber seeds. As you can see, they're long and short in the center. They're going to go through my fingers. Just put them here. So I'm going to take the seed, I'm going to plant it here, and I'm going to bring this dirt up just a little bit more and plant this seed here. I'm going to slowly cover over, just gently pat it. And that is so the dirt is completely engaged with the seed and it can stay moist. As I compress it, that's where it's going to get that depth of twice the width, because it was a little bit deeper before, but now that I've compressed it, it is now twice of that width. I'm going to continue on this row and we'll come back for the squash. On this row, I'm going to plant the squash, and they get quite large. I am going to plant them 12 inches apart. The cucumber I planted about 6 inches apart. I did not have enough room to plant the other 2 varieties, so we're going to go to a different row to plant the Honeyboat Delight, or I should say Honeyboat Delecta, and the scallop squash. I'm going to plant the Honeyboat Delecta in this area because the cauliflower is not going to be here. And just finishing up by planting the scallop squash over here. And we're going to cover it up. The last place that I planted the scallop squash, I actually have also planted okra. The nice thing is that the okra is going to grow tall, and I'm still going to have room in the lower portion to have the squash. It shouldn't interfere, and it'll be a little bit of a companion kind of planting. I did want to show you some of the tomato plants that I started back in November. I up-potted them to a larger pot and now have planted them in the worm bin. And they have some small tomatoes on them. Let's take a look. This is the pineapple tomato plant. And it is quite large. Has more flowers to set fruit. This is a Roma tomato that I upplanted. And to help support these tomato plants, when I planted them, I put this twine underneath the plant. And then I have wound it around, tied it off here for now, and later on when I need to support it more, I can go further and I can put a brace over the top of the shaded area of the worm bin. And I did the same thing on this one. Some people remove the flowers that have come together. I haven't. Sometimes that creates that cat-faced tomato that can cause deep grooves and can cause some rot. This is one of the tomato plants that overwintered, and as you can see, we have some tomatoes on here. We did have some frost. And this is that cat facing that sometimes can cause an issue. And there was some frost damage on here. This didn't make it. This is some of the cauliflower that overwintered. It actually oversummered. I cut the stem off at the base above the dirt, and they grew back and produced cauliflower. This one needs to be picked. It's getting a little long, but they do tend to become a little sweeter if you don't cut them right when they're super solid in their head. Here is another cauliflower. We ended up with about 12 that just sprouted from the root I cut off, and I only ended up cutting off about 3 or 4. I will be cutting that cabbage. It's huge. It's time for it to get harvested. In this bed where I added a lot of mulch, I planted some onions, and I'm just waiting for them to sprout. This is the leeks and garlic over here, and that is spinach right to the right of the cabbage, and some blue Scotch curled kale. On the larger bed we have carrots and our huge red giant mustard greens. Here are the mustard green leaves, and I just harvested the ones that were really huge already. They're quite tasty, sauteed with a little onion and actually some radish. The reason that I still have this mesh cloth over my greens is rabbits have snuck into the garden, and as you can see on this lettuce, they have had a little snack. So this mesh has really protected the garden this year from the rabbits really just decimating everything. I have it over here on the radish and kale, and this is some borage that has self-seeded from last year. And I've just been picking the outer leaves of the lettuce and letting them grow so we can continue to have salads as long as the heat permits. As you know, the heat really does affect the greens in your garden. It will send them right to bolting, and the flavor is just very bitter when that happens, when they're going to seed. How do you know when they're bolting? The stem shoots up from the center and you'll create a flower. That flower is going to produce the seeds. If you allow that flower to bloom and let the bees pollinate it, you will be able to have seeds for your following year. This is all the loofah that I harvested from the 3 plants that I planted. These are already dried and are ready to harvest the loofah from them. We'll just shake out the seeds and rinse the fiber, and the fiber becomes malleable. It becomes very soft, and then we can use it as our natural sponge. The areas that we just planted the seeds, I am going to apply this mesh. This mesh is 16 feet long and 65 inches across. So it's about five and a half feet across and 16 feet long. And what I have found is now my seedlings are not going to get attacked by the birds. I was losing everything to the birds, not just rabbits, but the birds also. So this mesh is going to really help out. It's very lightweight. So as you saw with my greens and radish, that they're able to push the mesh up while still remaining on the plant. It allows light in so they can continue to grow. All of the mesh has been laid down and anchored with some bricks to help from blowing away with the wind. The water will go right through this with our sprinkler system, and we'll wait for germination. Now that the mesh has been laid down and the sprinklers are going to do their thing with keeping the garden watered, we're just going to wait for some germination, and that should take about 5 to 7 days. So we'll check back and I'll keep you updated. Thank you so much for joining me today on this in-ground seed sowing, and also maybe a little bit of a look at the garden. Until next time, goodbye.